Thank you very much. It's difficult to applaud for anyone this early in the morning, and especially a politician, I suspect. My name is John Engen. I'm the mayor of the city of Missoula, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Sopris Foundation's conference in the beautiful, historic Wilma Theater on a fine yet hot Missoula Friday. I was impressed already that the Sopris Foundation has managed to get press, learned much about the conference already this morning on public radio, and was impressed with Piper's efforts in sort of laying out the scope of the conference and the conversation. And one of the things I was struck by was the notion that Missoula is doing some of the things in terms of innovating in what we call the New West well. And I'm grateful for that, and that has to do with a lot of people. But what it mostly has to do with, I think, is our ability to continue to have conversations. And that, I think, is the single largest challenge we face as leaders, planners, citizens, folks who want the places we live to be wonderful and continue to be wonderful for the generations that follow. Our capacity to have civil conversations with each other over issues that inspire passion and occasional fury is critical. I think the more we do this, the better we get at that. And it's a process that's relentless. It requires a tremendous amount of care, and as you recognized this morning, a little bit of coffee. With that, I will step down from the stage, which I can tell you is quite sturdy, fortunately, and allow things to proceed. And John, are you up next?
Good morning. I'm John McBride, who started the Sopris Foundation. I want to thank you all for coming. This is a treat to have you all here and to be here. I must say, this is the most magnificent facility I've been in years. It's superb. I'm a little miffed by the mast outside that says, Sicko Evening welcomes the Sopris Foundation. But regardless, we're delighted to be here. Let me just tell you briefly what we are and how this happened. We started this program about 10 years ago. I was on the board of the World Watch Institute in Washington and went with my daughter back to hear one of their briefings. Researchers and writers from the World Watch Institute were presenting their papers for the State of the World book. And there were about 30 people watching, and it was pretty interesting. And I said to Lester Brown, who was head of the World Watch Institute, I said, this is fantastic, but nobody's here and watching. Maybe we should have one of these in Aspen, near where we live. So we did that, and it became quite popular until a few years ago, Tim Wirth said to me, well, you know, it's wonderful what you're doing, but you're kind of just talking to the choir. You really ought to focus on the West, something specific that has a lot of serious problems. So we decided to try that last year, and we had a large turnout and very good speakers focusing on the West. We brought a number of people over from Europe discussing programs that they were implementing in Europe. And but what was so exciting about it to me was that so many people at the conference related and interacted in exciting ways, and a sort of an energy grew up around that conference. And that's one of the reasons we're here, because members from Missoula suggested it be here. And so I want to thank people like Stacy Rye and Bob Jaffe, Missoula County, Roger Millars, and Bob Oakes for helping bring this program here. Really, this is our second program, and it is an experiment, and you are part of this experiment in creating a new idea. If this works, and there is good interaction and energy created from a program like this, perhaps it will go to other communities around the West and and have more strength by virtue of being in different places. So I want to thank you all again for offering us the opportunity to do it here. I especially want to thank Piper Foster, who put this program together. We're a very large foundation, and she is the only employee. So thank you all again for having us. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, John and John. My name is Piper Foster, and I'm looking forward to making deeper friendships with each of you that I've met online and over the phone. We are a family foundation, and I really think that the family part of it is what compels our work, because we're looking to create a family in these dialogues and conversations that we host annually. Our first speaker today is Mark Chase, and Mark has been involved with innovative transportation projects and initiatives for the last 10 years, if not longer. Mark was instrumental in a program called Zipcar that is large in bigger cities on the coast. It's a car sharing program, streamlined car sharing. Now, Mark's new endeavor is called Go Loco, which, if you ask me, is a crazy idea that might just work. So he'll speak to us today about that, as well as parking. Not a super sexy topic first thing in the morning, but essential. So please help me welcome Mark Chase.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, the Sopris Foundation, for inviting me here today. It's my first time to Missoula. It's an absolutely amazingly beautiful town. I'm just curious, in the audience, how many of you are from Missoula? Wow, quite a few. You're all very lucky. It's an amazing place. How many of you were here last year? I'm just curious. And okay, good. Not too many, because my sister Robin, who was the founder of Zipcar, spoke last year. And I'm going to overlap a little bit with some of the stuff she said, but you definitely want to stay because most of my presentation is different. I'm going to be talking today about transportation and community building. And often when we think about transportation, and when you see some of my slides, it is pretty dang boring. It's, roads and sidewalks and things like that, but actually people use them, and to the degree that systems can build community, it's really worth thinking about, because the better transportation systems actually do embrace people and forming community. So with that, I'm going to move to a boring slide. Just very quickly, this is the most boring slide in the show. All transportation networks are made up of vehicles, networks, and places and terminals, and it's just useful to think about, because cars, for example, are vehicles that travel on roads and end up at parking spaces. And as a community, it's very hard to do anything about vehicles or roads, but you can do a lot about parking. And so I'm going to talk about that more. My specialty is actually alternative transportation or sustainable transportation, but people come to me when they have a parking shortage, because if you don't have parking, what are you going to do? You try and get people out of their cars so that you have more parking for people who really need it. Another reason why we should care about transportation is we spend an awful lot of money on it, and this might be hard to read from the back of the room, but the large green bar is housing expense, and that's 33% of what the average American spends. And the next one is transportation at 20%. It's about $8,000 a year. And most of that is on your car, or your cars, because in the United States we're approaching, or have surpassed, I think, 1 vehicle per person. So there are a lot of vehicles in the States, and they're actually quite expensive. And when I looked at this, I was disappointed to see that education is down at 1.6%, which feels like it should be reversed, although I don't know if I want to. I spent a lot on education, and I imagine quite a few of you did too. I'm going to be focusing on parking and then some technology solutions, but I have to talk about parking just for a minute. Walking just for a minute, because walking is the first and last leg of the transportation trip. And the more that you can get people walking, actually, the better it is for them, and the more community building happens. People meet each other on the street, or they meet each other in the parking lot, and that's often when they're on foot. To the degree that you can create beautiful spaces, people will actually loiter and stay there, and Missoula does a really great job of that. There is a lot of places in Missoula where you can just sort of hang out and talk to your friends and be very comfortable. And that's really an important element of the transportation system if you're thinking about trying to get people out of their cars and trying other modes of transportation. The other important thing about walking is that it's actually a really great form of exercise. Center for Disease Control says all you need is 30 minutes a day of moderate exercise. And we could actually get a lot of that doing things like walking to and from post office, shopping, and things like that. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I wanted to talk about walking just because it's so important. And here's just one slide of the walking environment. The two slides on the left-hand side show what I would consider to be a poor walking environment, and the ones on the right show a great walking environment. The ones on the right are urban. I don't think a great walking environment has to be urban. It can be a very beautiful suburban walking environment. But the lower left there is just an abomination. Like if you wanted to walk somewhere, you wanted to leave your car and you had to walk maybe 100 yards to go do something else, you'd be more likely to just get back in your car and drive down the street because nobody wants to walk in that environment. Now to parking. How many of you, I'm just curious, have had a problem parking a car, finding a parking space in the past 6 months? That's good. Most of you can relate then. It can be a frustrating experience, and really the question is, when do you give up? When do you pay for parking, if that's an option, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, and how far you're willing to walk. Transportation studies show that the longer that you're at a place, the further you're willing to walk, and this is instructive in terms of parking. Because if you're a coffee shop trying to sell coffee, people are not going to walk very far because they're just going to be grabbing a cup of coffee and leaving. Whereas if you're an employer and you're there all day, you might walk quite far to your employment site. So it's just an important thing to consider. Really, it boils down to time and aggravation. How much time do you want to spend looking for a parking space before you go somewhere else, or you go out of town, or you pay for parking? And this is where you hear merchants and often saying, you know, there's not enough parking. I'm losing customers, and that sort of thing. There's actually, is cruising, I haven't mentioned cruising, but cruising is when you're driving around the block looking for parking. And there's been studies of cruising in places with parking problems, and between 8 and 75% of the cars on the street were looking for parking. So that means that in some places, 3/4 of the cars on the street are driving around looking for parking. They'd take between 4 and 14 minutes to actually find a parking space. And if you're in a place like downtown Boulder or somewhere else and you want to do your own study, you can just watch when a car leaves and count how many cars drive by before that space is filled. If you do that 5 times, you'll have a pretty accurate idea of how many people are driving around the block looking for parking. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, and it's the only one that I have a lot of text on. But essentially, if you spend 3 minutes trying to find a space on average, and that space is used 10 times a day, that one parking space generates 30 extra minutes of driving. At 10 miles an hour, that's 5 miles extra of driving a day per one parking space. And an average block in a city has about 33 parking spaces, and that ends up being 165 miles a day of driving that's needless. What does that result to? A block could generate enough driving to drive around the world twice in a year of just people looking for parking. And that can amount to 2,000 gallons of gas a year, just from a block. So it's a problem. This is just illustrative. Obviously, every place is different, but parking is something that we should pay attention to from an environmental perspective and from a community perspective. Just some visualizations of what extra driving does in terms of accidents. So what do? You probably know from my background, I'm not going to recommend building parking. I'm going to recommend managing parking. But I'm going to address building parking just briefly because that is what most people think of before they call me to help them out and get out of their jam is, well, let's build new parking. The problem with building new parking is it's actually really expensive. A surface parking spot in the upper left there is about $10,000 a space, and it might be less in places with very low land values, but it's still probably close to $10,000. A garage is about $20,000. And underground, on the lower right, is my favorite parking garage in the world. This is a 2,500 space parking garage in Boston. It's underneath a park, and it's a very popular park. That costs around $40,000 a space, although that particular parking lot is much more expensive because of the park. But basically, to build your way out of parking sometimes is needed, but you should always try managing first, because why spend money on parking when you could spend money on transit or bike lanes or sprucing up your walking environment and maybe spend a lot less money and solve the problem another way. How does parking get paid for? And this is really critical, and I don't know how many of you folks have been up on parking lately, but there's a big buzz in the parking field about trying to get people to pay for parking as they go and not hide the cost of parking, because often people don't pay for parking. It's folded into the tax base. And that's okay in an environment where you don't mind people driving a lot, but if you want them to actually drive less, you want to think about ways of taking that out of the tax base and making it explicit, or it's folded into the rent and the cost of ownership. And I think the cost of housing is an issue here. It is virtually everywhere, that when you require a lot of parking, that adds to the cost of housing. So ideally, you'd separate the parking from the housing. So if somebody decided, like a family decided to live with one car instead of two, or two cars instead of three, that they would actually benefit from that monetarily and not have to pay for it. What are some management tools? There's generally what I've done when I've looked at parking problems. I was recently in Ann Arbor, Michigan doing a study. We look at every street and look at what the occupancy is at different times of day, and what you find out in the end is that parking is actually constrained at a very limited time of day, and that makes it much easier to solve. That there's opportunities for shared parking. Residents will clear out of the parking lot in the morning, where businesses will fill up the parking lot in the morning. So you can build less parking by having residents and businesses actually share a parking lot, but current zoning makes that kind of difficult. You always have to get a variance to do that. Pricing, and this I alluded to a little bit, instead of thinking of let's build more parking, the first step would be, well, what if we just put a little bit of a price on the parking, and then the people maybe who could ride a bike or who could walk or who could take a bus or could share a ride will do that to avoid paying, and that will free up all the parking. If you want to consider that, it has been done, and I'll talk about an example, but the key thing is, what do you do with the money you raise? Because if you just put that money in the general fund and forget about it, people aren't going to like that. They're going to see that as an extra tax, and you'll have a little revolt on your hand. But if you say, with that revenue, we're going to do something that you're going to love, then it makes it much more palatable, because you're solving a parking problem, and with the money, you're building something that people are really going to enjoy. Pasadena, California. This is a well-known case study among parking professionals. In 1994, Pasadena was very run down. The downtown consisted of hairdressers, bars, and pawn shops. The businesses were distressed because there wasn't enough parking. And the city came to them and said, well, look, we'll put in parking meters. That'll help with the parking problem. The business owners went crazy and said, no way can you do that. It's going to drive away business. The city came back to them and said, well, look, what if we gave you all the revenue from those meters so that you, the business improvement district, could improve the district, and you can decide how to spend that money to improve the district. And the business owners paused and thought, wow, that's a good idea, let's do that. What happened? First of all, meters used to be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The businessmen were like, why are we charging before 11 in the morning when nobody parks here? They don't start charging until 11 a.m. But they don't stop charging until 8 p.m. because there's still some demand in the evening. And on weekends, they don't stop charging until midnight. What that means is that people pay about $1 an hour to park. There are garages that they can park in where the first 90 minutes are free, and they never pay more than $6 a day. It encourages everybody to go to the garages if they're there long term. If they want to park short term, they're on the street. And the really cool thing about what happened in Pasadena that has people very excited is each block generated about $80,000 of revenue. And it created a cycle of virtue. Since 1994, basically, the Pasadena has improved radically. It's now a regional destination where people go to sit at cafes, watch other people, hang out. It's become a very beautiful place, and it's not all because of the parking, but the parking revenue that basically improved the pedestrian district made a huge difference. And so this is a case where parking, I think, is supporting the community. The money is not disappearing. It's going back into things that people care about and that they want to make the place better. One of the amazing things about Pasadena is they actually steam clean the sidewalks once a week, which, to get the gum off the sidewalks, which is really crazy, but, why not? It's making it a beautiful place for people to visit. Here's a question I get often. Well, if you charge for parking, what are people going to do? And they have about 6 choices. They can park for less time. They can park further away and walk, which is excellent for their health. They can park at a different time of day when rates are less. They could carpool and split the cost of driving, which is what Go Loco is all about. We'll talk about that later. They can park off-street, or they can make the trip in transit, bicycle, or walk. So it supports other modes of transportation. Most of these modes are very community-centered types of transportation that allow people to run into each other on the street and get more exercise. This is a parking concept that's a little bit, it's sort of an ugly slide, but it's worth looking at. This slide shows the typical suburban development where on the upper left there's a school and the yellow thing is an office. And further to the right, the red is retail, and the typical person drives to one place, parks, gets out, goes in, drives to another place, parks, gets out, goes in, drives to a third place, does the same thing. There's a new model, and it's called Park Once, and that is probably what most people do in Missoula, but should also be encouraged in basically like every new development. To do that, though, you need to have a great walking environment. So here's Park Once. You park in one location, you walk to school, you walk to shop, and you walk to the office. Well, what's the critical link? It's having a great pedestrian environment, because no one's going to walk in the lower left. That's just impossible, or dangerous to say the least. So again, the Park Once thing is a really good innovation. You can build less parking and then have people walking more, and which creates more community. It's all good stuff, but the walking environment is critical. Okay, I've got 3 legs of my presentation here. This one is car sharing. And as Piper alluded to, I was part of the management team that started Zipcar. My sister Robin was the founder of Zipcar. I like to say she thinks globally and I act locally. Car sharing is really like an amazing movement that is overtaking the world, and it's very urban in nature, but it's rapidly moving to universities, which means that if it's moving to universities, it could be nearby at any time. And essentially, instead of owning your own car or owning 2 or 3 cars, you may only own 1 car or no car and rely on a shared car. What you do is you become a member, which costs very little because it's all pay as you go. You get online and you reserve a car. The cars are all within walking distance. You go to a parking spot, you hold your card on the windshield, you let yourself in, the key is in the car. People often ask me, well, won't they just break the window and take the car? Well, actually, unless you swipe the card, the ignition doesn't work. This is something that could not have happened 10 years ago, and the reason is technology. Cell phones are now ubiquitous everywhere. So when you make a reservation on the computer, it's sending your ID to the car so that only you can get in and no one else can take that car. Conversely, when you're done, it's sending your driving information back for a bill. So at the end of the month, you get a bill for driving, like a phone bill. The really radical thing about car sharing is that it converts the fixed costs of car ownership, which this pie chart from the American Automobile Association shows 71% of your car costs are fixed. Leave your car in the driveway, it's going to be you're going to be spending about 71% of your driving costs. Drive it, it's 30%. And that's why people drive a lot, because people complain about gas, but gas is about 15% of your car costs on average. At the bottom, AAA estimates that if you bought a car in 2006, it costs you about $8,000 for a middle-of-the-road car, about $21 a day. So if you can avoid those expenses and share a car, you save a lot of money, basically, is what it comes down to. And then the community side. You have to walk to these cars, and you will do everything you can to avoid using the car because these cars cost roughly $8 to $10 an hour and $60 to $80 a day to use. So if you can ride a bike, or you can walk, or you can share a ride with friends, you're going to do that before you take a shared car. And that creates community. I like to think nothing creates community like poverty, because you have to rely on your friends. You're borrowing tools, you're getting help doing stuff, you're sharing rides. So I don't think car sharing is poverty, I think it's wealth, but it's taking all the costs of owning a car and boiling it down to 1 hour, and that's a good concept. In terms of the environment, it's pretty radical too. Every car serves about 50 people. Of those 50 people, 20 say they would own a car otherwise. So one car takes about 20 cars off the road. People drive much less because obviously it costs them a lot more to drive because all the costs are in there. So that is, here's a visual. This is actually a car on a video, sort of slow mode going into a parking lot on the right. Roughly 20 cars. And on the left is a zip car. So, what is it that makes car sharing work? I can tell you the key thing is there has to be times when you can do without a car. Because if you need a car all the time, it's too expensive. You're going to be getting into a car that has technology in it, that has customer service behind it. It works when you're in a university and you're spending most of your time on campus. Works if you're living in downtown Missoula and working in downtown Missoula, and maybe your spouse or partner takes your car during the day to go somewhere else and you're working downtown. You don't need a second car. You need density too, and density is kind of a dirty word in the United States because I think a lot of people, so as a planning friend of mine said, they want to barbecue naked. They want to live out in the suburbs, and and they want to be able to be out where no one can see them, and density implies that your neighbors are all over the place and seeing you. You can smell their food. There's a very positive side to density too, and for those of us who do that, and I'm sure there are many of you in the room, you all enjoy seeing your neighbors. There's beautiful yards in density. That needs to be played up when you talk about density, but that's what makes car sharing work, that's what makes transit work, and ultimately, if you're going to try and live with less cars, that's what makes that work. That's the car sharing segment, and I'm now going to talk about Go Loco, which is Robin Chase, my sister's newest thing, and of course, I've got to help her. I'm a transportation planner. I can't stay away from this stuff. When you look down the road and you see cars going by and you look in and you see there's only one person in most of those cars, and actually the census has tracked this, and roughly 80% of all cars going down the road are drive-alone vehicles at commute times. So there's a huge potential there. If you go back to that really boring slide of networks, and this is the network, and if you can actually get people to share rides, you clear up an incredible amount of road space. So that was the impetus behind Go Loco. The other impetus was people actually do share a lot of rides with friends to go places. They go to football games, they go to movies, they go out to eat. The times that they don't do it, it's only because it's kind of inconvenient to like pick up the phone and figure out if they want to go or not. You got to get something done. But if you could make that really easy to like hook up with your friends, then why not? And that's the impetus behind Go Loco. The other, of course, is money. As we recognized before, cars are incredibly expensive, and if people want to share the expense to defray that, that's a great thing. Another thing is social connections. And essentially, when you're sharing a ride in a car, it's a great time to catch up with your friends or get to know somebody new, potentially. And finally, there's the environmental side, and this is just everywhere. 5 years ago, people weren't, probably most of us were paying attention to it, but the general public wasn't paying attention to the environmental impact of cars. And so one of the things we've done on Go Loco is make it very easy to track your carbon emissions and feel good about what you're saving. This is something you probably can't read, but I'll just tell you it's a typical map showing a trip that you could take. And on the upper right, there's an A and a B red dots. And those are, you could take the trip with me, or you could take the trip with my sister and her daughter. And we both have trips where we're charging people to go to IKEA, which is like a fancy department store in the suburbs. We're charging for the trip, so it's cheaper to go with my sister and her daughter because they're going to be 3 people in the car sharing the cost, whereas if you go with me, it would only be 1 person. And then if you didn't know either of us, you'd be going, well, who are these people? I want to go to that department store, but how do I know this person isn't someone undesirable for whatever reason? So you can click on the profile, and I'm just curious out there, how many people have ever been on Facebook in the audience? Okay, looks like about 1 in 10. People on Facebook will recognize this kind of model pretty quickly. Essentially, Facebook is a way of connecting with your friends, and people who know Facebook and people who don't know Facebook think, what an incredible waste of time. You can spend all day, I already spend all day on the internet. Why do I want to spend all day on the internet keeping track of my friends? Well, a lot of people do. It is kind of addictive because I just started doing it as part of this company. But what we can see from Cassie's profile here is that she has been a member of Go Loco since April 4th. She's taken 5 trips, and then she has a bunch of friends, and it's probably very fuzzy, but some of them are in blue and some of them are in red. The ones that are in red are ones that we share. So if I didn't know Cassie, which I do, but if I didn't know Cassie, I would know that we shared friends in common, so why wouldn't I share a ride with her? She's also a part of many groups, and one of the things about Go Loco is you can form groups on the website, and these groups are things you like to do. So I'm a member of a contra dance group, and so is Cassie. She's also a member of a Kendall Square Theater group, which is a movie theater that people like to drive to. She went to the MIT Department of Urban Studies and Planning. So people form groups on Go Loco because anytime anybody posts a trip to a group, they find out about it. So if somebody's going to the movie theater, I can join that trip. That's really fun. So we've set it up to make it really easy for people to share rides with their friends. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have missed on this. There are comments at the bottom about Cassie that people have put. So if somebody actually is antisocial in some reason, like they play really loud music that you don't like to hear, you ride with them once and then you post a comment and you say, this person plays really loud music, and I asked them to turn it down and they didn't. And the next person goes and they're like, look at that profile and they're like, well, I love really loud music, so I'll join that trip. It allows people to identify with a person, and the website's set up to ride with your friends, but we know that people will expand it to do other things. Here's a picture of a group. This is the canoeer group, people who like to canoe. There are 13 members right now, so anytime anybody posts a trip to go canoeing, everybody else in the group gets notification and they can join the trip. And then this is the home page, and the only really cool thing about the home page is there's a drop down that says, where can I go in the next few days? And you can see what the whole world is doing around you. But you can also say, what are my friends doing in the next few days? And you can see like, oh wow, so-and-so's going to this great place and I'd love to go, and you could join them. And outside of that, the homepage just keeps track of how much CO2 you've saved and how much money you've saved and stuff like that. I'm sorry that it's a little blurry. And that is the end of my presentation. And with your help, we could end vacant seat syndrome. It's a terrible disease, but there is a cure. Thank you. And I think our format is the next speaker is going to come up, and then we're going to take questions after Hans has had a chance to speak. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So thanks to John McBride and the Sopris Foundation that I may speak to you today, and thanks to the city of Missoula that gave me back the hope that summer has not yet finished, because in Switzerland we had the short summer in April, and then since then it was cold, rainy, and we even have flood. But here it's nice. So I'm not really sure whether I will switch directly from the naked barbecuer into the transparent Go Loco customer here, but I think it's Many things that we have heard from Mark are directly also relevant for the question whether you can have public transport or not. Many things that he said about being able to walk in cities is also valuable for the ability to organize public transports. I'm well aware that talking about railroads in the United States is a special subject. We have seen railroads do not exist in the pictures of transporting systems, not yet perhaps. Railroads in the United States are mainly freight transportation systems, and for that they are world-class, they are benchmark. We, the European railroad responsibles, we are learning from the US railroads how to be efficient and how to do it cost-saving. But railroads are not a principal, a main transport system for passengers. So I'm concentrating my speak here on passenger system, and I will do that in 3 parts. First part, I will try to explain perhaps why in Switzerland, where I come from, trains are an important transport system for passengers. What are the facts behind that, and what is also the framework within these functions? And then I try to figure out what are, in my opinion, key factors of success for the railroads, to have a base to compare. Is it transferable to the United States? And in the third part, I will show you some example of tourist trains, because I have learned that there is a certain interest whether we could also do something here in the west of the United States, for instance, at the Glacier Park Resort. To introduce myself, I am not an engineer, so if someone asks me how the cogwheel drive of a mountain railway functions, I have to say I don't know exactly, but I sure can get you in contact with the guy who knows everything about cogwheel drives. I'm an economist, so my approach is more from the market and the money side of the problem. I have been working for Swiss Federal Railway since 1978, and I have accomplished many managing functions in all the business units of the railways, freight, passenger, and also other elements, other questions. I have, in the last responsibility, I have been the Chief Operation Officer of the Swiss Infrastructure Division of the railways. Now I'm running the old men's club of SBB, the SBB Consulting Group. We're a small team. After 59, you leave the line function and you come in as top manager in the consulting group. So we are happy if we can help anyone in the world to improve railway systems. The facts behind the Swiss model. The question what can be learned from the Swiss model is not so easy to answer. Political conditions and frameworks are not the same as, for instance, in the United States. I prefer so to tell you what we think are the key success factors in our country for public transport. This will allow a discussion on the elements which can be transferred to the United States. The first reflection is the standard of public transports in Switzerland is extremely high, and it costs a lot of money. the World Economic Forum rates Switzerland world's #1 in transport and communications infrastructures in the Global Competitiveness Report 2006-2007. Since December 6, 1987, the Swiss population voted 10 plebiscites on development of public transports in Switzerland. From these 10 plebiscites, 8 of them Swiss people have voted yes, deciding in sum on a public funding of rail infrastructure projects of 25 billion US dollars. This is a lot of money for a small country. The Swiss citizens have also repeatedly voted in favor of a modal shift in freight traffic from road to rail in transit through Switzerland. In Switzerland, trucks are not allowed to circulate at night or on weekends. This political and public will to take the train has helped Swiss railway companies to attain a model share which is very special for a Western mobile society. 22% of the entire passenger trips are done in Switzerland with public transport. If you take a city-to-city relation, for instance, Zurich and Bern, the model split of SBB, the train company, is 88%. 88% traveling for people traveling from city Zurich to city Bern take the train. In freight transport through the Alps, the railway model split through Switzerland is 66%. 2/3 of all the goods transported north-south through Europe, crossing the Alps through Switzerland, are on rail. In the neighbor countries, Austria and France, it is below 30%. Switzerland thinks that public transport are an important linking element for the society, the multicultural society. But we also know that rail infrastructure is very expensive. The SBB network costs about $1 billion per year for operation, maintenance, and renewal, and this is financed by the public funds. These costs are mainly fixed costs. So for that reason, we think if you have a railway infrastructure, it is very important to have as many trains on it as possible. So you see here a comparison of number of trains per kilometer, and you see that Switzerland has more trains on its infrastructure than Japan, for instance, or Austria, Germany, France, Italy, and France. This is very important. We have a very, very highly densely utilized network. And at the same time, it's clear we want to have people in these trains. We don't just want to let trains run through and fro and being empty, but we want that people utilize the trains. This graphic here shows the kilometers per inhabitant done by train, and you see the top line is Switzerland, then comes ancient communist Belarus, communist country, then comes France. France has many kilometers per inhabitant, and then the others. And the same pictures for a number of trips per year. Here too, Switzerland is on top of all the European country, and also worldwide it's only Japan which is in the same numbers of trips per inhabitant. And it is not that the Swiss don't like cars. It's not, don't have one car per Swiss like I have heard here, but we have 520 cars per 1,000 Swiss, so it's, it's not quite as in the United States, but we have many cars too. But it is just that the Swiss fairly often prefer to choose the train, to take the train to make their trips. And with that, we are perhaps now in the second part. Why is it like that? What are the success factors? And there, I think something is very important. I told you about the plebiscites that are voted in Switzerland. If you want to spend money, normally you have a plebiscite. You have to ask the people, is it like that or not? And in such a system, as a public transport system, you just have to be important, to be of utility for most of the people. We cannot afford to have in Switzerland a high business class railway, high speed for a small segment of passengers. What we want to have is a railway for anybody, for everybody. This is very important. So it is also important that we do not want to have one category of luxury trains and the rest is old and not well working. Every element in the chain of transport, regional trains, intercity trains, has to be of a good standard, as you see here, and also the stations where you change between the trains. Where cities develop, trains have to follow. It is like that. Decisions to take a train is done at home, and if the train is very far away from you, you're sitting in your car, and then you're a lost customer for railways. So we develop so-called S-Bahn systems, Stadtbahn or city train systems, where cities expand. This example here is the city of Zug. It's located on the Gotthard freight main line, north-south main line, very freight-oriented, and many of the experts at the beginning of the idea said this is impossible. Having light trains in a 15-minute or 8-minute cadence destroys all the possibility for the heavy freight trains. We tried it and it works. The system is working and the freight trains are still running. It needs a little bit of thinking and looking for a solution, but it is possible. Customers of the Swiss Federal Railways, SBB, they love the trains. You see, Switzerland has only 7.5 million inhabitants. But what we are transporting is 285 million of passengers every year. Of course, there are also tourists. Not all these passengers are Swiss, but it gives a relation. What you have seen, that the Swiss really often take the train, 780,000 passengers per day. And if you include to that numbers also the passengers with the private railways, the tourist railways, you come to 330 million of passengers per year. And most of these passengers, most of Swiss rail passengers are frequent users. I will show you what this means, the half-fare card and the general abonnement. I think it's very important to have fun in trains, and that starts with children. Children normally, they like doing trips in trains because in a train mom and dad, they have some time for the children. They can run around in the train, everything, all things that they cannot do in airplanes or in cars. So basically, children are good train customers, and I think that can even be improved. This is in a double floor intercity train on the main line in Switzerland. You have in every of these trains, you have a family car where children can play in. What we also think is very important is that we have a long-term strategy to develop train offers and the infrastructure network. This strategy not only includes the development of the leading railway, the SBB, Swiss Federal Rail, but also of the other 40 railway companies operating in Switzerland and the bus and tourist services around this network. This philosophy is an integrated development philosophy. Normally, for such plans, you start with someone draws on a map a line where someone has to construct an infrastructure. And then you organize the money, you build the infrastructure, and then you start thinking about how to operate the new line. We do not start there. We start with the idea of the offer we want to create, the market needs, and then we do an integrated optimizing of the elements, offer, rolling stock, and infrastructure. This is the basic idea of our development approach. It is most important for us that we all the times we start thinking with the entire network, because it is not of a big use in our point of view to be very good in one single line and neglect the other parts of Switzerland that could not work in our system. What is very important is cadence timetable, at least one train every hour, then on denser relations every half hour or every quarter of an hour, interconnected hub and spoke systems with all transport modes, easy to use. We are not a fan of complicated boarding systems or reservation system. We think a train is an open transport element. You just have to be able to come in and take your trip, make your trip, and convenience for frequent users. This is goes a little bit also near the ideas we heard before. What we are organizing, because it's clear also in Switzerland you cannot reach everyone with a public transport system. So we are creating systematically a park and ride facility very near to the railway station, so people come with their cars, place it on the park and ride and take the train. You also see that this is an example of a hub. The intercity train stops in the same time the post bus arrives, brings people living around from the location here. I told you about the hub and spoke system. We have realized with the Rail 2000 project the situation that in every big station where many train connections are produced every hour or every half hour, the traveling time between these nodes, these hubs, is less than 1 hour. In some cases it's more, but then the node is not at the time, the full hour or the half hour, but at quarter past and quarter to the full hour. So this creates a situation where you don't need to study a timetable before you begin a trip. You just take the next train, and you are sure that in every station where you have to change train, where you take another train or a bus or a ship or whatever you want, that there the connection is granted. This has really improved the ability, the readiness of people to take the train. We also have some high-speed trains, but we are not, don't make a religion out of high-speed trains. We think that high-speed trains are just one mean that you need there with the infrastructure from ecological or economical reasons. We cannot build the new infrastructure to reduce traveling time to less than an hour. There on these lines we have introduced the intercity Neigezüge tilting trains, high-speed trains, which can go faster through curves, so we could reduce the traveling time below 1 hour. I said before, it's very important for us to have also modern regional trains. You see here an example of a light electrical motorized unit, we call them flirt trains, and they are very popular with our regular citizens. I told you about freight trains. We have also in freight traffic, Switzerland has a high market share of rail. This is the Gotthard line. What we have seen is that freight trains must be systematically designed into the timetables because they have another a way to circulate on the infrastructure, on the network. And if you have very dense passenger train systems, there is a risk that freight trains are all the time stopping and letting the passenger trains pass by. And this is what would result in a very poor efficiency and productivity. So we design systematically freight train passes in our timetables. I think very important, but this is perhaps something you know very well here in the United States. Very important is also are the stations. I think for too long times, railway companies did not pay enough attention. Stations are important because there you have the first impression of this transport mean, and it is also a question of your feeling of security. So railways, this is the central hall of the station of Zurich. It is full of life, and this also helps the railways because when passengers like to go in these supermarkets with rail connection, then they feel also better at home in the railway itself. We have a convenience for frequent travelers. We have a half-fare card. More than 2 million people, customers in Switzerland, are in possession of this card, which gives you a 50% discount on all your trips you do. And it costs at about a little bit more than $100 a year. And we have the general abonnement, a general pass, which includes SBB trains, all the other trains, buses, tramways, mountain railways, and so on. This costs about $2,500 a year, and then you circulate as you want on the entire network. And this is very successful. I think it's a big number of frequent users. Something which is very important in Switzerland is the quality of the services, mainly the reliability of the services. Swiss have You know, Swiss are doing wonderful watches, so they have a certain orientation on time, and if trains are not on time, then the Swiss are not happy. So punctuality is very important for us. At the moment, we have a certain, we are suffering on the many trains we are having between Bern and Zurich. The average punctuality you see here is good, but on this very important line, punctuality is below that, and this creates in regular times, this creates articles in newspapers, and we are working on that now. Punctuality, reliability of rolling stock and infrastructure assets, and as I said before, safety and security for the passengers. In Switzerland, it is like here, it's a mountainous country, and we used to have from time to time special situation. This was in the year 2005. This is the Gotthard main line, north-south. It has been washed away because we had floods and earth slides. We wonder whether this has something to do with global warming, because we have more of these incidents in the last years, more than we have before. In this situation, it is very important for us that we can be able to react quickly and to be back to a regular service as soon as possible. So, if I can summarize the key success factors that we think we have in Switzerland is integration of the transport system, intercity train, regional trains, buses, park and ride. Then the cadence timetable, which is very important because it makes it easy to use public transport if you don't have to study a timetable first. An appropriate comfort for passengers in rolling stock as well in intercity trains as in regional trains. Easy to use convenience for frequent users like our passes, and reliable operations with high punctuality. These are what we think are key success factors of public transport. Now the third part, I have been told that there is an interest in tourist trains. What we are running in Switzerland is we have, I will show you some spectacular trains like Glacier Express, Bernina Express and so on, very well known from tour operators all over the world. Most of these trains are operated by relatively small companies, and 9 of these companies, meter gauge railways, have funded the Rail Plus Association, which is a sort of a platform enabling them to cooperate to create efficiency, more efficiency and economic advantages. You know, traditional railway companies, at least in Switzerland, are very do-it-yourself oriented. They want to do everything by their own. And this creates very complicated, heavy organizations which cost a lot of money. So I think it's very important to tell them, hey, not everyone has to invent electrical motor or something like that. This exists already. You can buy it or you do it in common, something which you cannot procure on the market. So this is the approach. One of the companies in Rail Plus is the Matterhorn-Gotthardbahn. You see here a picture of the Glacier Express near the Matterhorn. Glacier Express is one of these luxury trains relating Zermatt with St. Moritz, and is fully climatized. It's very popular by tourists and can be booked all over the world. You can go in the internet and book it. Another example is this one. I like that very much, not only for the reason, this is the Rätische Bahn. This is a railway, a relatively big railway. It covers the southeastern part of Switzerland, the canton of Grisons, Graubünden. I happen to be the president of the board of these railways. I like it. And I especially like this thing here. You see, we call it the horizontal looping. They prevented with that solution, the engineers in 1920, when they constructed that, they prevented effectively here that a cogwheel drive had to be installed. A cogwheel drive. It's very complicated. You have in the middle of the rails, you have like a ladder, and on the locomotive you have a wheel, and then it climbs up like that. If it's too steep to go as a normal adhesion railways, you need that. And with that construction here, we could prevent that. And it's very funny. In the middle of this circle, in summer, they do outdoor activities, and the attraction is on both sides. Passengers in the rail, they look they like to look what is happening, and the spectators of the happening, they like to have the trains running around. This is also the Rhaetian Railways, the Trenino Rosso, which runs from Tirano in Italy to over the Bernina Pass. It's in winter. You see, this is also it's not bad to open such a line in winter. You have to work, and this costs money, but it's really beautiful. Other possibilities, light rails in cities. This is an example at Bern. I chose it because it shows something which I think is also very important for the chances of public transport system. This regional traffic system between Bern and Solothurn. It existed since, I don't know, 100 years, but it was a line which passed when it went outside Bern. You saw more cows than people, so it was an agricultural region that this train passed through, and the trains were also mostly empty. Then in the years 1970s, the communities alongside this railway, they decided in their regional planning that they do not want to have their development spreading around, but they want to concentrate it along this railway line, around the stations, to have the people near the stations, near the railways, to prevent that everyone building a house that has to take the car. And that worked very well. First of all, the region developed much more quicker than the other regions around Bern. Second, they have an intact ecologist system. You have the trains are always full. The problem at the moment is that the underground station is much too small. Nobody had thought about this success. And really it works, but it proves again, railway has only a chance if it is a part of an integrated development. This is a nice train circulating south of the Lake of Biel. It's also a member of Rail Plus, ARS Elandmobil. It's a very weak region for public transport, but people there have already twice had votings about should they take away the train and change the system to buses, and twice they have said, no, we want to keep the trains. Now they have modern light EMUs and it works. This is another panoramic express on the Brünig route. The Golden Pass Express, which runs from the Lake of Geneva to Lucerne. It's also very, very beautiful, and this is a line which has been washed away, 2/3 of it in the year 2005. In the meantime, it's all redone, but this was very, very critical. The entire valley here was underwater, and the railway was washed away. Another example near the city of Aarau, and you see, you can do wonderful things with railways. It works if people want it, then it goes. But I think it's very important to see. I take the Rhaetian railways as an example, but it is valuable for all the other examples I have shown to you. It is very important to understand that such a railway earns a lot of money in the market, but what it earns is at about 1/3 of the total earning. It earns also money with real estate and so on, a little bit with freight service. Almost the half of the earnings comes from a public mission the Rhaetian Railways fulfills, the order of the canton of Grisons to produce regional transport services. So also tourist trains have to need a solid fundament on a regional train order where they get paid, and the tourist trains is sort of cherry on top. So this is what I can tell you about Swiss railway system. You see, it's a very good system. I like it. I utilize it very often. I'm not the only one, but it costs money, and it needs to be integrated in the entire social and transport plans of a country. It is the same thing what we heard before from Mark concerning pedestrian possibilities is valuable for the possibilities for taking public transport. If it's insulated, then it doesn't work. If it's integrated, then it works. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we're going to take some questions from the audience, and I've been informed that Sopris is making a documentary, so we'd really appreciate it if you use the microphones, and I think they're about 2/3 of the way down from the door in the aisles, and we'll take questions.
I'm with a group here in Missoula that's promoting rail service 40 miles south from Missoula to Hamilton. And we have very little of the characteristics that you mentioned for success, and very little of the caricature of Switzerland aside from the mountains. We don't have the population. All of Montana is 1 million people, if that. And we don't have the population density, but we do have some aspects that we think are on the plus side. We have some great destinations. We have the airport, we have downtown Missoula, we have the university, 13,000 students. We have a great biking and walking community to make that integration. And we have an existing rail line. And we have the owner of that rail line living in Missoula. And it does connect to two great rail stations that are used for other things right now. And it also connects to a main east-west rail line that runs from California to the East Coast. So I wanted to get a sense from you, given your experience in Switzerland, whether you thought we were crazy or we were visionary or somewhere in between.
I think you have a good chance to do a good job because what you said, it's not important whether all the people live very close. It's a good start if many people are living close to the stations, but it's not that is important, but that you have big potentials. And if you have an airport and tourist attractions, then you have big potentials. I would say you have to negotiate with the owner of the rail infrastructure on the conditions on how you can utilize it. Because normally, I would say roughly, you can earn enough money to pay the operation cost of a railway. This is a fair deal. You can do it, I'm sure, with your attractive nature here, and that this will work. But you cannot pay the infrastructure, the maintenance, the renewal of the infrastructure. And if you find a good deal there, then go ahead and do it. And I like to help you if I can.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, good. We got one on the left, and then this first, and then...
Okay, I'll ask you a question. I enjoyed your parking element there, and we live in communities in the Roaring Fork Valley where paid parking has been implemented in Aspen, but you can tell it's on the way in the other communities. You talked about the money being turned back into the communities, but what percentage of that, one thing you didn't mention was, what percentage of that money that's collected goes to enforcement and infrastructure for the cops?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I can tell you that when you start having when you have available parking spaces, there are less enforcement issues. And the trend in parking is to go away from time limits and to use technology to manage the parking spaces. So for example, if in Pasadena's case, if somebody wanted to stay in a space all day long and pay $1 an hour, nobody would have a problem with that because there will always be other spaces available on the block for someone to park in. People in parking are moving towards pay by cell phone, which I think is a really great way to pay. It's a relatively cheap system to implement. And when you do that, you have much less enforcement going on because people get text messages when their time is nearing and they can refeed the meter without even going back to the meter. These are the kinds of technology things that actually also make it easier to sell because people hate feeding meters. And why, in a time when we have so much technology, are you requiring people to have correct change when they could use a cell phone or a credit card? Sorry, I don't know the cost of the enforcement, but I can give you my card and certainly get that to you. There was someone on this side who I thought was at the microphone. Oh, okay. We'll go back and forth on each side if you just want to line up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm working with some people on trying to get rail from Vail to Denver. That was the original idea because I-70 is a major corridor and it's completely plugged up with cars. And then in a previous conference, I talked to Mr. Paganini, is he from associate of yours? He said in order to make it profitable, you needed to work between two large population centers. And my question is running rail from Denver to Salt Lake, because then you have two large population centers. And then you look at that and you say, okay, you need tunnels through the mountains, and this gets expensive. And then we hear about French rail that goes like 350 miles an hour. And then you begin to think, can rail compete with air? And then you begin to think about the economics of that, and then it starts to make some sense if it's possible. And And then I have hundreds of questions in regard to how many rails you need, and can you have high-speed rail that goes straight from Denver to Salt Lake and then service like the Vail Valley, like a milk run kind of thing. Can you kind of give us a better picture of how this works in terms of fast rail, slow rail, and integration of freight in all of this? Very complex question, I'm sorry.
Yes, perhaps I think there is something organized this evening, so everybody who has such rail-oriented questions is invited. We can meet together and discuss in depth a little bit, perhaps. Just shortly, I think the answer is like before. Constructing a new high-speed line is terribly expensive. So if you have already rails, then you must look for intelligent solutions, having, for instance, tilting train, reducing the traveling time because they can go faster on existing lines or something like that. The law it exists, the so-called Lilsches Reisegesetz, the law on it's like the gravity law. Huh? If you have two big elements, the gravity forces are strong. If you have two big cities, the traveling relations between them are strong. So yes, of course. But if you have one big city and one very, very important spectacular touristic element, then it works also. But I think to look for the solution, there are different solutions. I don't think that the French high-speed system is the only example. It's wonderful. It's well working. It's very fast. But really, this solution is good for a very intensive situation between big cities where you have a very dense. It's replacing the air transport. And I don't know whether this situation you are telling is really this basic situation to replace all the planes.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wiley Rogers. Thanks a lot for speaking today. In Denver, we have a unique problem. Light rail has planned expansion down to kind of the Front Range corridor, and with it, people are holding on to their houses and speculating that prices will appreciate rapidly, and it's making it very difficult to secure affordable housing for people who really don't have the money for transportation costs, buying cars. Has that been a problem in Switzerland when you have a new rail expansion planned, and how do you deal with getting people to the light rail when you have kind of a sprawled Front Range format of housing where people are getting pushed to the periphery because housing appreciation is happening along the planned rail spots?
Do you understand the question?
No, not really. I have not really understood the situation.
So, Hans, I think what he's asking is when housing is very expensive around rail, is there solutions to that in terms of getting people to the station from less expensive housing or ways of government programs to make housing less expensive? Is that roughly what you're thinking about? Or?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't exist. This link has never been made in Switzerland until now because housing is expensive everywhere in Switzerland. So this is the reason why I did not really understand what was the problem. You can go where you want. You'd pay a lot for houses or flats. Sir.
Thanks.
My name's George Breed. I live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, but I've lived for several years in Switzerland. I've lived in several years in Boston, and I know very little about Japan, but I know a lot about Western Europe and the United States. My question relates to the fact that Americans, particularly in the West, insist on taking their automobile with them. In the East Coast of the U.S., less so. And in Europe, people separate very readily from their automobile. Question, do you have any automobile carrying train, wagons, cars that pass through Switzerland? Are there any automobiles loaded onto railroad cars in Switzerland?
Yes, sir. Yes. There are existing, let's say, missing links in our motorway system in Switzerland, where it has been decided that instead of constructing very, very expensive motorways, which are also open during the winter, there is a train shuttle service where you can go on with your car. Is paid by the public. You pay also to use it, but it's not the full cost. And this is, but it's only the exception. It is in the canton of Grisons to go in the Engadine, the Vereina shuttle, and it is between the Berner Oberland and Wallis on the Lötschberg. But this is an exception because there are no motorways on the mountain, so we have chosen that solution. It's nothing we would say, it's not an example to multiply everywhere because it never covers the cost.
So, yeah, thank you. No, so you're just confirming that you have no problem in Europe having people leave their automobile back home and they go to their destination without an automobile. They can always rent a car when they get there if they wish. So you don't have much. We have a huge volume in the U.S. between Florida and Washington, D.C. East Coast people north of Washington, D.C. spending a month or the whole winter in Florida, and they just want their automobile with them. Now, if you look at what Roger Brown, who just spoke here, talking about the I-70 corridor between Denver and Salt Lake, one very large American firm put in a huge depot near no population. They're simply using I-70 as a driveway from Salt Lake, another part of the driveway coming in from Denver to this very large facility, which I won't name, but to use I-70 as a driveway to a huge shopping center where the parking lots measured in square kilometers is very discouraging to some of us who have to add more lanes to I-70, and in probably 5% of I-70, there's no room for additional lanes. It has to go underground, and someone's going to pay for that. So we have a real crisis, I believe, on I-70 between Denver and Salt Lake. It's going in the wrong direction, and hopefully tonight or through some forum here, we can attack that problem. It's a serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Whitney Gant, and I was recently living in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was part of a car sharing organization. And it worked really well for me. I was able to walk and take buses to almost everywhere I needed to get. And then I would avoid using the car at all costs because it did cost per hour, even though I was saving thousands of dollars a year by using it. And I recently also moved back to Taos, New Mexico, and took my car down there because there aren't public transportation options. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas, Mark, on possibilities in rural areas that are really spread out and where people are commuting to work every day, 15 or 20 miles, if you have any ideas of what you could do.
It's really difficult in rural areas, and I think it's because the density, by definition of being rural, is very low. But one innovative thing I heard from someone in Maine that I thought was a neat, what I would call informal car sharing idea was, Maine is pretty dispersed, but people in an office of like 25 people, they just made an agreement that anybody who got to the office by another mode of transportation, say biking or walking or taking the bus, if they ever needed a car during the day, they could borrow keys from anyone to just use the car. And I think that's kind of like a nice thing that you can do in an office to encourage, people who are taking other modes to do that. In an actual rural area, the closest thing would be a park and ride lot kind of situation where people go to one location, jump in cars, But that really only happens when parking is really expensive downtown, because otherwise people just tend to want to continue on their way. All that would change radically if gas keeps going up, because I think right now it's around 15% of the cost of owning a car is gas, but if the gas price doubled, it would then quickly become 30%. So, you know, that could really impact rural communities, and then there's going to have to be quite a bit of, you know, folks trying to figure out ways to share rides and continue to maintain a rural lifestyle when it's quite expensive. But that's conjecture. That could be 50 years from now or next year. We don't know. So. So this is going to be the last question. As you can see, Piper is getting the cane out to yank us off the stage. Go ahead.
My name's Steve Loken, and I have a question for Hans. Could you describe the cost per mile in your challenging terrain, the cost per mile for building a railroad?
Have never really, although the Swiss, as you have seen, they want to have rail and they want to have the model share, but direct incentive, taking money out of your car purse and putting it into your rail passenger purse, they have never been accepted like that. It doesn't work. On the contrary, we have systems where motorways are financed and these funds are full of money, and people want to have this money spent for motorways. And only in a very, very little extent there are some projects where motorways and rails are interlinked, where we can say, for instance, this example with transferring cars on railways for a short distance. Private transport money can be transferred to public transport, but the rest, no, it has never been accepted.
It's always nice to end on a tax policy question, so thank you both very much. John and I are really compelled by the fact that a good idea contains within itself the momentum to put itself on the ground and get to come to fruition. And so I think we've heard from Hans and Mark the spectrum of ideas that can be implemented much more quickly and those that may require patience. So thank you both.